Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Corey Behrens, and you're listening to the Simplistic Views podcast. This is a podcast where I explore the lives and works of digital media content creators and marketers. Today, I am joined by Eric Floberg, who is a digital online creator. He's a YouTuber. He's one of the best wedding filmmakers, in my opinion, and he is a father to 3 beautiful children. Eric, how's it going, man?
Going great, man. Thanks for that intro. That was super sweet. You're really good at those intros, dude.
That was straight off the dome, not gonna lie. Like I kind of had an idea where that was going, but that they're usually straight off the dome.
Dude, I know now. We have a podcast now, and I'm like, I have to read off a script. I can't just, it's all littered with ums and being like, oh, duh.
Oh, man. So, hey, can you give the audience like a little context? I know this is like one of the first questions that everyone asks that I also hate, but like, just to give the audience some context as to who you are and what you do.
Totally, yeah. You mentioned it in the intro that I do YouTube and I photograph and film weddings, but even just this past year, my job is just kind of siphoned off into a bunch of branches of different things. So I'm now, excuse me, oh wow, this is like a 17-year-old Eric just came out right there. It's early.
We're going through some growing pains right now.
We started a podcast in the beginning of this year, in 2021. My friend Steven and I called Rally Caps, so I'm a co-host of that now. I started a new finance YouTube channel with my close friend Mike. So that channel is called Eric and Mike. And so we have those two things going as well. I am a part owner of a creative space in Chicago called Creative Club Chicago. And as of this month, we're actually moving up 2 floors in this building to double our space so we can have more dedicated space to podcast and to do YouTube talking heads and to rent out the studio for shooting. So yeah, it's kind of equally just doing all those things now. I'm trying to bring down the amount of weddings I'm shooting per year. Since 2020, all those postponed to 2021. I'm shooting more than I'd really like to this year, so it's going to be a grind. But kind of in years, looking down the road in 2022 and beyond, I'm hoping to kind of be in the 8 to 12 wedding window, still making content on my personal channel, and then those other 2 channels with the podcast and the finance. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
I like your future outlook on that. I think, I still do weddings too, but not as much as I did in the past. And I think 8 to 12 weddings is probably like prime. Like everyone, like I think most people that are in the wedding film or wedding photography industry, like that's their equilibrium. Like that's where they want to be. They don't have a wedding every single weekend that they have to prep for. They can just go ahead and live life as it should be, relaxing.
Right, yeah. It seems to be the goal for everybody, and I feel very lucky to kind of be in the place where that is a possibility for me. My issue is I'm such a yes man, so if I get a ton of inquiries, I might just be like, oh, that's another paycheck, or oh, that's another opportunity, or oh, that's a cool place, And so when it gets to this point, it does take some discipline. So the other component of that I didn't mention in all of the work I'm doing now, I also have a Patreon where I do extra content for wedding photographers and filmmakers, just kind of doing BTS of all the stuff that I do, whether it's portrait sessions or behind the scenes at a wedding or a commercial shoot that I do. And so I also feel this necessity of like, if I'm going to keep making content about that, I don't just want to drop off the face of the earth and not shoot any weddings at all anymore. Like I still want to be relatable to people who want to learn from me and still want to be connected to that space if I'm still going to be teaching in that space. It doesn't have to be 20 to 30 weddings a year. While I do that, I'm still able to totally make that happen with, 8 to 12. So that's the other component too, where I'm like, I still, and I love it. I just love doing it.
Dude, after like the night ends, I feel so accomplished. Like I feel like, oh, I just like ran a marathon. I just went through all these hoops, and it was fun. Yeah.
It really sets you up for so much success. We're realizing, so Mike and I, outside of the finance channel, we're doing a million things. Everyone keeps being like, how do you do this? And it's like my answer to that has just been like community and surrounding myself with people who come alongside me to do these things. But Mike and I are also dabbling in commercial work. We think we just landed on kind of a name and a brand for what that'll be as well. So Eric and Mike will kind of be a BTS of all the financial and business side of what that commercial work will be. I think ultimately that commercial brand will kind of oversee that channel. But the more and more commercial work we do, and the more and more we've been relating to commercial clients, the more and more we're seeing how wedding photography and filmmaking has set us up for so much success in that space, and transitioning to a space that's not as relational, but we're bringing that relational component into commercial work. And I feel like so many businesses and brands aren't used to that. They're just not used to, they're not used to people like relating to them on a personal level and talking to them about their family and like getting emotional behind the things that we do. We just went on a shoot a week and a half ago, and we did a voiceover for literally like a 30-second video, 30 second to a minute video. And we jammed on this voiceover with them. And we could tell like these people on the marketing team of this business are like, they're really invested in this business. They've worked there for a decade and they're emotionally invested. And so as we kind of worked on this script together, we got it to this place where like we were really happy with it. And then I put on like my YouTube voice and I read the voiceover to them. And like there were tears in the room, just being like, wow, like we're all really proud of this now. And that moment was like, it just felt like all this intersecting of all of our strengths and being able to relate to people. And a lot of that foundation is because we've shot weddings and been able to relate to people in those emotional ways. So that's really tangential, but
well, I want to jump off onto that too, is that a lot of times when like the summer when I was working around the country and doing different things. And one of the more specific jobs was I was working as a camera assistant on a production for like a fertility clinic. And the fertility clinic, they had worked with videographers in the past, but they my good pal, Robert Decora, he's just like been a huge mentor to me. He comes at like filmmaking and videography in such like a people-centric way. He really taught me like how to interact with customers, interacting with clients and stuff like that, because a lot of times, and even they even said this on one of our shoots, they said, well, you know, we've had videographers in the past, but they never like interacted with us, they never really wanted to talk with us. They just wanted to get the shot and go to the next shot. They didn't create that experience. So when I was working with Rob, he kind of showed me the ropes of like, this is how you create an experience. This is how you make a positive, you know, impact on the organization and make them remember you.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, we're starting to be more and more convinced that that's more important than the actual visual and audio that you're able to capture. Just because in the same way, I always prep all of my couples if I'm going to go do a portrait shoot with them, I always do a little pep talk, 5 to 10 minute pep talk at the beginning, saying like, hey, being in front of a camera is a very weird thing that all of us are not used to doing. So like, it's going to feel weird and it's going to feel awkward. And as we get into it, as we get to know each other more, like through this process, you're just going to feel more and more comfortable. We'll be playing music. We'll be having conversations. You guys can eat and drink or we'll do whatever. And so just kind of bringing that same thing into the commercial space as well, where it's like, we don't even need to take the cameras out yet. Let's just talk. Like, we had dinner with one of the employees the night before and just like talked about all of his history it was a printing house. So just like all of his history of him and his wife and being in the photography scene and the printing scene. And we had no idea that they were like celebrities in that world. And so being able to connect with them in that way brought so much more clarity to the company and what that employee meant to the company. And then you start like connecting all these pieces where then you're able to relate to some of the employees in a completely different way, where then you bring up that guy and his history and they're like, oh yeah. And then you're jamming on that and they just feel so much more comfortable in front of camera and with the whole experience of you being there.
Exactly. And you talked earlier about being a yes man. Let's go ahead and let's talk about maybe, because I also had that problem. Someone's like, hey, could you do this? And I'm like, I may not actually want to do it. And I'm like, okay, sure, fine. But like, while I'm doing it, I'm kind of dreading it. Can you talk about like some certain examples or ways you can curb not being a yes man 24/7?
Yeah, recently, like, it's funny because like, I think I told you this on the podcast. I was like, man, I'm trying not to do podcast appearances as much as possible. But like, I also want to be the person where if you went to the extent that you did, Corey, of like, your talking head was gorgeous. It was perfectly centered. Like it was symmetrical, and you, like the intentionality was so good. Your Casey Neistat reference was hilarious. Like,
play the intro. I feel like Casey Neistat in this like set.
I can't. I feel like I literally can't say no to that kind of stuff, especially since that's what I always preach, where it's like, if you go above and beyond, like at times you deserve to be rewarded for doing that. That's what we're trying to do with Rally Caps nonstop, is just like go above and beyond with our pitches of scripting them out and being hysterical. We just pitched Niles and Caleb of Moment, and their response was hysterical. They were like, they absolutely loved it. We pretended to be them, like back and forth.
Okay, yeah.
For their Dad Strides Running podcast, and it was just really funny. So I also know and want to be self-aware enough that like if my following or my subscriber base or whatever gets to a certain point where there's a ton of people making those videos and like putting a ton of effort into all these pitches, I know it's not sustainable for me to say yes to all of those as well. And so ultimately, I just think it's just that piece of self-awareness and recognizing like, what are you capable of doing? What do you see as an opportunity for yourself to grow your brand? Like going on a podcast can absolutely be something that helps you grow your brand or kind of unveil what you're doing to a new audience. But then other times it could just be for connecting more with people and building more relationships. And it's kind of mind-blowing what you like, the connections that you make with people that you didn't think you would, just because you had a conversation with them on a podcast. So yeah, I don't know if that really answered the question, but ultimately,
yeah,
like,
no, it definitely does. But keep going.
I'm trying to get better at saying no. I'm trying to, like, I've definitely recently said no to a bunch of other things, and it's really painful for me to do it because I'm such a yes man and I'm such a people pleaser that I feel like I'm totally letting people down if I don't, do the thing they're hoping I do. Because if I am balancing all of these things, I will take a hit to like what I'm able to do. And so even part of this, like this podcast, I was like, hey, could we do it at 8 a.m.? Like then I could just, once we're done, then I just start my work day instead of it being, in the middle of the day that breaks up a work day. So getting kind of strategic with that kind of stuff and things that you do say yes to. And then, yeah, not being afraid to say no and set some of those boundaries for yourself as well so that you can accomplish the tasks that you really have a vision for.
For sure. Thank you, by the way, for coming on the podcast.
Of course, man. Yeah. But also, we have a personal connection, too. Like, we hung out at a coffee shop.
Right.
Was it a year and a half ago? Or
Yeah. So Eric and I's background actually is I was on a trip to so I was involved in the Entrepreneurs Club back at my university, and I was going to Chicago, and I'm like, who do I know in Chicago that I kind of look up to or that I want to connect with? Because at that time I was thinking because this is early 2019, and I'm like, oh cool, I'm gonna move to Chicago right after I graduate college. Well, come to find out, a pandemic happened, and so that kind of knocked me on my butt. But I landed in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is a cool place. I like it. Maybe Chicago in the future, who knows? But yeah, so I reached out to Eric. And I'm like, hey man, I am going to be in Chicago this time. Can I meet up with you, learn more about you? And he was like, of course. And I'm like, shout out to you, Eric.
And honestly, I don't like to shy away from these conversations, and I don't want to come off as like, hey man, I'm a celebrity. People are asking me to behave. At that point, people weren't asking as frequently to hang out. And even when you said that, you talked about potentially moving to Chicago, and I was kind of at this intersecting point of okay, I might want to have people start editing for me, that you might potentially be a person like that. We could collaborate on different things. And so it's multifaceted. But even now, just with more growth on the channel and more of an online presence, it's and obviously we can't hang out in person a lot of times.
Right.
Just trying to balance those things and figure out what are the choices I can make. And so that's always kind of a delicate dance that I'm trying to do now of how can I not kill myself with meeting a ton of people, but also still like trying to meet and collaborate with people in a way that can be beneficial for both parties, you know?
Yeah, and that's the difficult part right now. Like, obviously, networking is no longer a thing. Virtual networking is a thing, and I've done a few of them, but it's just not the same. So, like, you know, and if you have the opportunity, like, here's like a little advice for the audience right now. If you're having a difficult time networking with people, I get it, and it's really hard. And one thing that might help you, it's certainly helped me, is I learned this from a guy named Ryan Serhant. He's a real estate agent and broker in New York City. He reaches out to like multiple people a day, and so I make it a goal to like reach out to at least 2 people a day. Just kind of like, you know, get to know them, say, you know, drop them a line, say, hey, this is my name, this is what I do. You know, interested in having a conversation with you. And usually that actually, like, that has led up to a lot of work for me, or friendships as well. Like, there's like these 2 guys on the street with their A7S3 or A7 whatever. They're Sony cameras, and I was like, hey guys, what's going on? Like, you know, and I love it walking up to like guys who are filming, because I'm like, oh, I'm the weirdo, like that doesn't, like, they're like, oh, it's probably just like, what are these guys doing? But like, I'm like, oh, is that like the Sony camera, the A7 III or whatever? And they're like, oh yeah, and they're like, oh, okay, this guy isn't weird. So, that's subjective, but you know, so it's, you know, just even, you know, walking up to random people, socially distanced, and like, you know, tell them what you do and stuff like that. So yeah, building that community, just build your community, keep doing it. It's going to get better. In
whatever way you can. Yeah, that's making a YouTube video soon about community over competition. Going to be collaborating with a handful of friends on a short little film about it. And it's one of the biggest parts of my success in my career is being able to collaborate with other really talented people in the space and referring work to each other, hiring each other, scratching each other's backs, like, and just having this sentiment of like, no, I'll drop what I'm doing to help you out. Like, that kind of mentality has just been unbelievably good for me and helping me grow leaps and bounds in what I'm capable of. Namely, Mike just like buying gear that I probably wouldn't have and letting me use it and teaching me how to use a Shure SM7B podcast mic. And
shout out to Mike.
Yeah, seriously. And like pushing me to get a cinema camera and like trying new things that I would feel uncomfortable doing otherwise. It's just really helped me grow as a creative and a filmmaker. And now I just have so much more tools in the toolkit to tell stories better. So,
mm-hmm. Well, let's go back to when you didn't have any tools. Let's go back to when we were building community. In 2016, you went to an Instagram meetup and you met someone who would eventually play an instrumental role in your I believe it was more wedding photography career. But can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you know who I'm referring to?
Yeah. I went to this random Instagram meetup, which was actually put on by my friend John Stouffer, who wasn't my friend at that time, and I was a fanboy of that guy. He was recently on my podcast, just a total stud, like interior photographer, huge Instagram following. He was put on like Peter McKinnon's short list of favorite Instagram follows. So I saw him at the meetup and I was just like, yo, what's up, John? Like, I'm Eric, blah, blah, blah. And so there were just like a bunch of people hanging out on a rooftop, and my buddy, Daniel Inskeep, was flying a drone up on the roof. And that was the first time I'd ever seen a drone in real life. And I was just like, that's crazy. So I'm hovering around and kind of, you know, being that guy, just like, oh, whoa, let me see the monitor and blah, blah, you know. And so him and Rachel were there, and we just had a conversation and hung out a bit. They're really introverted, so not many people were talking to them. And so we just kind of, I wouldn't even say hit it off. We just had like a small conversation and then followed each other on Instagram, and that was that. And so I know, once I realized who they were, I realized I had already been following them on Instagram because they were like Instagram suggested users. So I had always, at that point, Instagram did that with profiles. And so I realized, oh, like, I think I already know who you guys are. And then we just kind of kept up on Instagram over the next year, and, you know, messages here and there. I didn't think much of it. And then I got a random DM from Daniel, and he was like, hey, Rachel can't shoot this wedding in Thailand. Do you want to come second shoot it with me? And I was just like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds great. And so we had never like really hung out in real life outside of just an Instagram meetup for an hour. And so I find myself flying to Los Angeles for the first time ever, and then flying to China and Thailand for the first time ever on a 17-hour flight with him. And we just,
twice.
It's brutal.
Yeah. That flight is so hard.
Yeah. Thankfully I slept for a solid 8 hours, but he infamously rags on me because I don't remember doing this, but he's like, you didn't get up to pee once that whole flight. And I was like, what?
Dude, I make sure. Okay, so I've been to China and Thailand as well. I make sure on every international flight that I go on that I have the end seat, because I pee all the time on those flights. Like, there's just like every hour, and I can barely like sleep at all.
Normally I'm that person on road trips that like always has to pee or just get like tiny bladder syndrome. But when I'm traveling or I'm on a flight, it's just like it goes on lock and I don't have to as much. I don't know why. So I was probably just super dehydrated. We don't need to talk more about this. Okay. Anyway, they start Mango Street right around that time, their YouTube channel, which just like totally blows up. I think at that point when I went to LA, they were at like 30,000 subscribers. It was growing, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. You know, I was in my Casey Neistat phase, just trying to be Casey Neistat, so I'm vlogging all of it. But there's some of the first videos on my channel and really nostalgic and fun. And so that started a relationship that has just bloomed a ton since, and we're close friends now. And
well, I have to say that and maybe not even aware of this right now, but did you realize that you are one of the first TikTok, like you use a song in one of your vlogs that is currently a popular TikTok soundbite?
Really?
I forgot which one it is, but I was watching some of the vlogs back then. In one of the, I think it's your trip to LA in specific, that one of the songs you used is now a TikTok song.
I have to look back at it, and you have to tell me which one it is. I'll have to make it a TikTok and be like, yeah, I made this in 2017. No big deal.
Yeah, it was just ahead of the curve
before TikTok was even a thing.
Yeah, it was just Musical.ly back then.
That blew my mind when I didn't realize that it was Musical.ly. It turned into TikTok. Mm-hmm. I feel like a grandpa these days. I just like, I don't know what's going on.
You and me both, brother. Even I'm 23.
Do we need to start getting a middle part?
Yeah, no, like, where's the grays at? There's no grays yet.
Oh, dude, I have plenty on the side now.
Yeah, I'll take some of it. Oh my gosh. So you're down in Hong Kong and you don't like the food. Are you a picky eater?
Traditionally, yes. I grew up a very picky eater. When I get put in a completely different culture, I'm always just like, oh my gosh, no. And whenever I end up eating whatever is there that's good, I'm always like, oh, this is great. I don't know why I was freaking out. But if someone doesn't push me to do that, I just won't. I'll like stick with American cuisine as much as I can and just be a sissy. But yeah, I'm getting way better now that I'm like approaching 30. I'm like actually adulting a bit more now and trying different dishes and really enjoying a lot more cuisines recently.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
Well, see, when you're because I also so when I was in Shanghai, I was also introduced to a lot of things that like I just never like seen in my life, or like there's some foods or actual shrimp, like good shrimp. I was just never like around it, and so I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool, but kind of weird at the same time. And then so you go from Hong Kong, and there's a lot of people, obviously in Hong Kong. One thing that I found was kind of funny in one of your videos while you're in Hong Kong is that you're running in the streets. But it looks kind of weird. It looks like the people they're like looking at you. We're like, an American running. Also, well, I guess it's Hong Kong, so not the same thing maybe. But when I was in Shanghai, a lot of people stared at me because like they don't see white people that often. But yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, Hong Kong's very busy, and we weren't really in that busy of a part of the city, but there's still just like so many people walking around, just everywhere. And there was really no place I found to run. So I kind of just made it a game where it was just like dodge everyone. Like I probably looked like a psychopath, but that was when I was like really getting back into running, and now running is just a huge part of my life as well. So it's fun. It's really fun.
How many miles are you running a day?
I'm dealing with an ankle injury right now, but this past fall was probably one of my biggest segments, and leading up to my marathon in November, I got up to like 70 miles a week, so 10 a day towards the peak of it. So yeah, when I'm in that kind of season, I'm doing about that many miles. So.
Man, that gives me PTSD from cross country in high school. Oh my God. So, okay. So now we're in Hong Kong, and now we're flying, I'm going to assume like 4 hours, is it, down to Bangkok? Or where did you end up going to?
Yeah,
Thailand?
We went to Phuket, which I think is really far south, but we
on
basically
the western side.
Yes.
Or,
yep.
Yeah, western side.
So we got sunsets and everything. Yeah, we basically got on a flight, got on a bus, and went straight to a resort, and then just were at a resort for the wedding. So it's not glamorous. Like, we didn't actually get to experience Thailand, which was kind of a bummer.
Okay.
We definitely knew that going into the trip that Hong Kong would be the experience that we got to have, which we did, and it was great. I got to run a little bit in Thailand, so like I got out of the resort and kind of ran around the rural area around there, which was pretty cool. But outside of that, I honestly would do it very differently now. Like, I would love to try to get out more, take some more film portraits, that kind of stuff, like in a place where I'm very unfamiliar, try to interact with some people. So
one of my, I traveled Thailand out of a backpack for an entire month last January.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so that was a lot of fun. And like I brought my camera with me, and I took some dope shots. There was one shot in particular that's my phone screen background right now. I'll show you. I'll throw it up on the let's see here. There's so many notifications. I'll throw it up on the screen for. There we go. I'm not sure if you can see that.
Oh yeah, the dog.
Yeah. So the story behind this dog is that like on the beaches every morning, there's just a bunch of dogs because people feed them.
Yeah.
And this dog in particular kept following me around, and I felt so bad. I didn't have any food for it, but it just kept following me around. So it was my pal for the morning while I was taking some photos on the beach, and then he ended up jumping up on a big rock, and I'm like, oh, perfect, I'm gonna get a photo of him now. And now I have a photo of him for the rest of my life, and I'm so happy about it.
It's those little kind of interactions, whether it be a little furry friend or like a human, like even those just small little things of remembering trips is super fun. And again, that's why I love kind of the nostalgia of those vlogs. It's like I put a lot of hard work into making those. And yeah, I mean, looking at the skill set I have now, I look back at, the gear or the sound or how little I knew about the technical parts of filmmaking at that point. And it's really cool to both see how far I've come and from a technical perspective, but also just like the story of the community I've built and how that all came to be. So part of me wants to integrate more vlogs like that. Still, it's just really hard for me to do that because I'm very not the person that's like carrying around a gorilla pod and being like, what's up? And so. Yeah,
same here.
So it's hard to, like, how do I do that in a way that still is like me, authentically, really me?
Okay, so on the subject of YouTube, let's go to YouTube. So you obviously started with these vlogs, and then you got into more of like how-to stuff, and then you started posting your wedding films on YouTube. How did like that kind of shape your experience on the platform, and how has it influenced you up until this point?
Yeah, when I started making the vlogs, it was just kind of like, okay, everybody makes vlogs, it's not really that impressive or interesting. And so none of those really got any traction from an analytical perspective. But once I started making tutorials and they got like featured on blogs and the algorithm kind of put them into recommended, that's when I started to realize that YouTube is first a search platform. So a place where people go to, basically Google how to learn something. And then I really kind of realized the component of building a YouTube platform. It really, like most people find success in one of two things: is offering value to the viewer that can end up giving them some sort of skill or can help them monetarily, that can help them make more money. That's really kind of what I'm aimed at more with my channel. And then secondly, just an entertainment perspective. So you see a lot of someone like Gus Johnson, who's a comedian who has a platform of millions on YouTube, is just strictly entertainment, and he's unbelievably good at it. Or someone like Drew Gooden. They're incredible at
old Vine days.
Yeah,
old Vine days.
All those Viners just kind of transitioned into YouTube. But those are like two of the main things I look at in seeing how someone can realistically build a platform on YouTube, and just being self-aware of that stuff. Now, does that mean that you always have to do one of those things? No, like you could still make things for yourself and make things you're passionate about in the process, of course. But it's always just kind of balancing that line of being like, okay, what kind of value am I giving to people? How am I not just like selling out and only doing sponsored videos, which isn't wrong either. Like just kind of always towing the line of like, I just always want to come across as like, I'm just going to be as transparent as I possibly can so it can benefit you all. I'll teach you tutorials and BTS and how I run my business and even the numbers of the money I make, so you could see what's possible or how I do stuff. But yeah, it could very quickly just turn into this thing that you're like, you feel this necessity of I have to do it this certain way. And while there are like clear ways to grow a channel and like offer the entertainment or the value, ultimately you have to have a clear goal of like what you want it to be.
Is there any way that you like kind of assess what you want, or assess like the things that you want to accomplish during that? Let's say that I have always wanted to start a YouTube channel. Like I have before, I just am never very consistent at it. But is there like when you were kind of doing some ideation on your YouTube channel, what were some specific things that you took into account when creating goals for your channel?
I'm always that person who has lofty goals, like a 5 to 10 year loose structure in my head, but it's never anything that's like completely concrete. So I look at someone like Gary Vee, who's just like enormous platform all over social media, but he has this concrete goal where it's like, I need to own the New York Jets. Like that is the end goal. I don't have anything like that, and so I don't want to pretend that I have goals like that, but I do have loose like ideas of like of what I want. And so when I started the YouTube channel, it really just started with this is fun for me to do. It helps me strengthen my skills in video making, in film making, in audio, in visual, in design, and it helps me flex muscles in a way I haven't been. And so then as I continued to kind of realize like what I was good at and what I could offer to people, I started realizing that I could mix my kind of natural ability to tell stories through, having already done wedding filmmaking, and then just kind of teaching my perspective on how I run my business. And so it was this idea of like, okay, well, I can be a source that's helpful for these people, and in the meantime, I could just keep growing a subscriber base. And that might just come off as something that's shallow, but I didn't realize what that could be, how it could be monetized eventually. I remember getting my first AdSense check. It wasn't even a direct deposit. It was literally a physical check I got in the mail.
I was 11 years old.
Really? That's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. On the last podcast, I talked about this, but basically the TLDR version was in 2010 or 2011, I had a video go viral that had 100 and something thousand views, and all the stuff was in my dad's name, and so my dad got a check for like I think it was $150 from Google, and he was like, what's this? And I'm like, so I have a YouTube channel that I make stupid skits on. And he was like, "Oh, cool. All right. Well, keep doing your thing, I guess."
Yeah, it's kind of mind blowing to see something like that come. I didn't even know what AdSense was. I didn't understand, and then I was like, "Am I getting this from my YouTube? Like what?" And then it started to the gears started turning. Like, while that's a small fraction of the pie of what most people do for monetization on their channel, it just kind of opened up this reality of like, wait a second. And then I started connecting dots I kept going to wedding photography workshops and having this feeling of, after I went to like my second one, I'm like, I went to school to be a teacher. Like I could totally be in that position. Like I know I have what it takes to teach some of this stuff and get up in front of people and do that. I know so many people have anxiety and don't want to do that, but I'm like, I'm born and bred to do that. And so I started having these feelings of, feeling resentful. Like if I went to one of those, I'd be like, I deserve to be up there, which is selfish and dumb. But it also was kind of that pull that I needed of like, well, if this has kind of just always been how things happen for me, like nobody's seeking me out. Nobody is recognizing my talent or skill. So like, all right, I'll just try to put it out there myself, you know? And so that was a lot of kind of the motivation of starting my own thing, where it's like, okay, well, and I was naively being like, why on earth would they want me to speak? There's nothing special about me. And so
literally every filmmaker in the entire world.
Yeah. And so you need to prove that you're a speaker worth inviting to a conference or whatever. And so that's when I started to realize like, oh, well, okay, I need to make some sort of online presence or portfolio that proves that I am capable of this. And so I'll talk about my background in teaching, and I'll actually give people information that is worthwhile. And yeah, so that's sort of what started the ball rolling in that way. And so then I started to realize like, oh, I could start my own workshops. I could start my own online education. And then once that started growing, then people were asking me to speak at workshops and that kind of stuff. So that got the education side rolling, and sort of how I've been able to monetize the YouTube channel more.
How has that education side given you the ability to maybe even disseminate some of the information online, and also if you could also go into more of like, you know, actually teaching the workshops as well?
Yeah, I've done about 4 or 5 workshops in person since 2018, and my last one was literally a year ago once lockdown started. So that week we switched everything to online, and thankfully Mike was there to just like help me do all of that.
Again, shout out Mike.
Right, yeah, just always there in the background hustling. And yeah, it's interesting. You have to kind of figure out like, what am I going to put where? People are always asking me like, you can't just give away all your secrets or whatever on your YouTube channel, which I get, you know. So really the way I look at it is I'm not hiding anything. I just see YouTube as more of like an appetizer, and any kind of workshop or my Patreon or like that is like actual nourishment and like a real meal. And so that's kind of the metaphor I've been drawing. And so, yeah, if you scour my YouTube channel, you might get 75% of everything I teach, but it takes you having to binge all of that. Whereas if you just come to my workshop, you'll get all of the information in a day or two, you know? Or if you do sign up for the Patreon, like every time I put out a video, you'll get a new piece of the puzzle. And so I'm transparent about that too. It's like, I don't need to do some sort of gimmicky thing that makes you go like, oh, but if you pay this much, you could get access to this. I'm like, I hope you have enough self-awareness to realize that like at whatever price level you're able to enter, you'll get more than you need. You know, like you'll have tons of information coming your way. It's just a matter of like what works best for you. And we've recently been making PDFs for people who like learn way better just by reading. And I know there are tons of people who are like that, who want to literally print off a sheet of paper and take notes on it. Like, I want to offer that to people who learn better that way. It's just like the teacher in me comes out, and it's like, I want to give avenues to everybody in all the different ways that they want to learn. And
I think accessibility is,
Yeah.
I just want to like talk about accessibility. And one thing when I was in college, I had to sit down with someone, I think it was like a computer programmer. I was working at an internship, and I had to like figure out how to like make our website better. And I was sitting down with like a university workshop, WordPress person, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, she's like, I'm disabled and I can't see, and sometimes I have to use like a reader on, and she was, kind of talking about her disabilities. And that's when I realized like accessibility to whatever information that you're giving is extremely important. So for example, when I'm doing proposals, I have a written PDF version of a proposal, and then I make a video like this talking about it, because people learn in so many different ways that what came across on a PDF paper, reading it, may not have come across how you thought it would be in a video. So I can emphasize certain points. I can maybe even put graphics on the screen to show, to drive home the point. So accessibility is so important.
That's such a good point. All of our pitches for commercial work we've been doing as video pitches recently, but I sent one to a friend, John Bunn. He runs the podcast How to Film Weddings, and he was like, one thing and my wife said this too. It's like, one thing I would change about this pitch is, it's great. Like, the video is amazing. You have all of the content and information written as well in the video, but give them a PDF option as well. Like, do both. And yeah, you're so right. Like, another pitch, someone actually asked for a PDF, and I made the video, and he was stoked about the video. But my wife again was like, but he asked for a PDF, so do both. And I'm like, you're right. Yeah, it makes more sense, because he might not want to search through the video and find the spot that shows it all laid out visually. He might just want to look at a piece of paper. But you're right, in the intentionality and like being able to communicate emotion is so much more powerful through a video presentation. And if you have the ability to do that, like, you'll knock people's socks off by doing that. So
we've talked about like YouTube and stuff like that. You are now doing separate YouTube channels besides just your normal channel with all the wedding filmmaking stuff. You're also doing the podcast, The Rally Cap. Can you talk more about, let's do a Rally Cap first, and then we can kind of dive deeper into, the YouTube side.
Yeah, totally. I really wanted to start a podcast in the midst of growing a YouTube channel as well, but it was just that added component of I can't handle one more thing. And, my buddy Steven has been an associate photographer under my brand for a good year and a half now. And a year ago, we had this idea of potentially starting a podcast and what that could look like. I think we were literally on a FaceTime call, and we were both editing, and we were just talking over it. He's on the East Coast, I'm in Chicago. And we were talking about industry stuff while we were editing. And I'm like, what if we just recorded these kinds of conversations where we're just, we're both editing and talking. And so that was kind of that first idea, and kind of had our brains running on like, okay, this could be a possibility. And then all sorts of craziness happening in 2020, kind of putting all that on the back burner, still being sort of an idea. And we just kept coming back to this idea. Do we want to start it? Do we want to start it? And then fall and winter came around of last year, and we're like, let's make this happen. And so we created a plan and everything, and we ultimately decided we didn't want the podcast to be just strictly about wedding photography or one specific part of the creative industry. We are starting with interviewing a bunch of YouTubers and well-known YouTubers and people with online presence. But our long-term vision for it is like, we just want to be a source of telling stories of creative entrepreneurs, or just entrepreneurs in general, of how they found success doing what they do and how they could do it sustainably over time and not just burn out. And so, yeah, our initial name was Slow Burn, and we were on that, and then realized it's an enormous podcast.
You did a few episodes.
Yeah, we just we were so pumped on that name that
That's so cool though. You just like went for it.
Yeah, we didn't know that. And that's so me. Like I always jump in before doing the research.
Me too. That's me. Yeah.
But the funny thing is that Steven's not that way. He was just so excited that he didn't realize. And it was hard to realize that. We felt kind of lost. And so we took a few weeks to figure out what we wanted the new name to be. But just coming back to that whole thing of nostalgia and how much we love nostalgia, we both have a background with playing baseball as kids. And so the whole idea of Rally Caps just was so enticing. He came up with a list of names and we said that one and we're like, oh man, that hits really hard. The whole concept and metaphor of like, we're all in a team together. Like we have community, we can rally together when we feel down, and out. Like you put the rally cap on and you push forward with your teammates. And so, yeah, we're really pumped about all that. Like we're about 8 episodes in. We've been posting weekly, been really consistent with it and just seeing a bunch of growth in it. So, yeah, really pumped about it. And the technical part of it is that this kind of coming full circle is I said I couldn't handle one more thing, but Steven realized like the platform that I had built with my YouTube channel and the connections I had made with other creators that would be great guests. He's like, you know what, I'm willing to come alongside you, go 50-50 on this. I'll produce it all. You just show up. And his hope in that is like, maybe we could grow this thing big enough so that he doesn't have to be putting in all of that admin work, all of that editing work, but that could be hired out eventually.
That's the same with my podcast. Back in like, I think it was July, a kid from my old high school contacted me. He said, hey, I see that you're doing some film work. And he's like, I'm really interested in that. Like, that's what I would like to do in the future. And so we got to talk and, we kind of fell off the wagon with each other after that initial contact. But one thing that I learned in college in my entrepreneurship program was that if you can delegate something that's going to ultimately give you time to focus on things that are more important, do it. And so this last week, I reached out to him and I'm like, hey, I know that you expressed interest in like wanting to do a podcast someday for yourself and wanting to get, experience in the video industry. Would you like to edit my podcast? And he was like, of course. And so now, Michael, thank you. You're editing the podcast. I appreciate you. But like, it's just like, it's being able to find ways to, give other people and not even like putting it on yourself saying like, oh, I did this for this person. It's like giving the other people the opportunity to experience something that they're interested and to explore something. Because I'm like, and I said to him, like, as soon as this is not fun for you, like, I don't want you to do it because I don't want you to dread having to, because I'm so bad at that. Like, it's like coming back to the yes man thing. Like, I'll say yes to things like, oh, I'm dreading doing this. So I'm like, and he's a high schooler. So I'm like, man, like, school's more important. Like, I want you to get some experience, but ultimately, like, if you're not having fun, do not do it. Because I wish someone would have told me that.
For sure. But that kind of ambitious attitude can get you a seat at the table for, when things do get monetized or something does grow. And so being willing to just take a step and try something like that can just lead to so much more, especially if you have the awareness of seeing, like, if you're partnering with someone who has the potential to grow that thing. Yeah, so we have tons of ideas of what Rally Caps will be in the future and how we can monetize that as a podcast. But yeah, 2021 will just kind of be the litmus test of us being able to do that. So
let's go ahead and we'll wrap this up here in a little bit. I want to talk more quickly about like the YouTube aspect stuff that you're doing right now with like the finance side. And then like the creative entrepreneurship channel that you're creating. So could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I realized very quickly when I was following people like Graham Stephan and Andre Jick and financial YouTubers, Jeremy of Financial Education, like there's a bunch of them. I realized like what the possibility for YouTube AdSense was with a financial channel. And it intersected at this point of me really liking talking about finances and being transparent about all my finances in business. And it felt like a really good opportunity of being like, well, if this is like one of the best paying genres on YouTube when it comes to AdSense, and I really love doing it, why not pursue it if it's going to help people even more? Because I've already done financial stuff on my own personal channel. I made a video about passive income that got so many more views than my normal videos, and how I made $100K a year as a wedding photographer. That one blew up. And how my friend Austin got out of debt, 84 grand of debt in a year and a half.
That one was such an inspiration to me, man.
Yeah, like, and it's just this transparency of talking about finance and all these videos just blowing up and being like, it's not that I'm going to stop making those kinds of videos on my channel, but I would love to have a dedicated space where I could collaborate with somebody else like Mike, where we could like make actual mini documentaries about people getting out of debt and being the space of talking about our own financial journey and giving people inspiration of, there's this whole one we're starting this week. We filmed some of it in the summer, and we're going to continue on it this week, of a playlist called 1 to 1 million, of the concept of taking $1 and trying to turn it into $1 million, and just in any way possible, what that could look like with flipping things online. And we just want
1,000 calls on GameStop for next week.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see about that. But yeah, we just want that dedicated space there, to ultimately be something that we're passionate about first and foremost, and that we're giving value to people. Well, hopefully, in return, we can monetize and grow as well. And so I always want to make it abundantly clear that I have community around me to try to keep me in check, that if my mind ever goes to a place of, I'm only doing this to monetize it, that's where I've lost my entire philosophy of what I care about and who I am, is that I really have no interest in making, like, I know that drop shipping exists, and I know that like big money making things exist. But I would just feel so empty doing something like that, because so much of me as an educator and wanting to influence and like help other people, find success in entrepreneurship and find success financially. And so I really want to meld those two worlds together, where it's like, of course I'm an entrepreneur and want to build a business and make money and have a legacy for my family, but at the same time, I want to help other people do that same thing. And so just trying to always look through our content creation through that lens of like, how are we doing both? You know, how are we helping other people, and how are we providing for our own families and our own businesses? And just finding that, and like, the more and more I make this stuff, the more and more I'm triggering people online. Like, there are definitely comments rolling in of just being like, you only care about money, and just be like, okay, like, you can believe that, but like, I know what our heart is in this process, and we've actually made no money on this channel. We've only given money away. So like, you know what?
And that's the best part. You know what? Just giving them. See, that's what I find, if you guys don't, if anybody out here has read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's like, one of the things is like, make sure to give away a portion of your money. And to me, like, when I do that, I feel like it's good karma. I've always like, obviously you feel good about yourself. And it's not, and I'm not donating money just like to have expectations of getting the money back. But I just think it's like in some form of good karma to do that.
Yeah. It's just giving back to community in general is like, and everybody's different in how they do it as well, because you making the YouTube content that's free is also you just giving things, like, you're giving really good information away that could end up helping people monetize whatever they're doing. Or something brief that I said one time about getting out of debt and starting to invest. A guy took that to heart on one video I made, and he invested in Tesla and like 10 times his money. And then now he's really into stocks and is just killing it in that game right now. He DMs me every once in a while and just being like, thank you so much for making that one video that one time. And he's making so much more money with investing than I am. I'm like, that's amazing.
He's balling out.
Yeah. It's like, I was just a voice that helped him realize like the lane he wanted to go in and what he was passionate about. And at the end of the day, I'm like, it's kind of priceless. Like, it's that whole concept of like, catch a fish for a dude or teach a man to fish. And like that whole idea of like, what does it look like to incentivize people to teach them how to fish for a lifetime? Like to teach them this concept of like, what are they going to do long term? What's going to motivate them to build something sustainable for themselves and not just something that's like a quick money maker or whatever. But yeah, like the heart is so important to me, the heart and philosophy. I'm always going to be making content that's helpful, but is going to be riddled with some sort of like, hey, and this is my heart behind this. This is our heart behind this. I always talk about a huge template I use a lot is hook, info, heart on videos. Just like get them interested in the topic, give them a mess of information, and then just hit them with my philosophy and why I think it's important and, you know, what's sustainable and what really matters.
I'm glad you put your heart into it, man. That's a lot of that. A lot of times it's like, you know, it's some people are half-hearted. Some people just go into something expecting things to kind of be given to them, and I'm glad you're not like that. So
yeah, I appreciate you saying that, man.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up. So we can wrap up the podcast. These are, you know, the people that listen to this podcast. They're digital marketers, they're digital creators. What is like maybe one piece of advice that you'd like to leave them with?
It's always what I teach in workshops and what I've learned from other workshops is like really understand what your why is. I think in the entrepreneur world, it's so easy to chase different things that are trendy and exciting and what people tell you should chase. But I think the best way to run something sustainably is to have a strong philosophy on why you're doing what you're doing. And if you haven't done that, take the time, however much time you need, to figure out what that why is and how you can communicate that why to anybody you collaborate with or anybody that hires you so that it could be sustainable for you and that you're not just running on something that's empty.
Awesome. Eric, the words, they leave me speechless. But yeah, no, man, I thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate you coming out today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the podcast. If you'd like to know more about Eric, I'll drop his links in the descriptions below. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. See you later.